Okay, is there anyone who seriously thinks that Mehdi Hasan is American at all, much less as American as anyone else? There was not anybody with the last name Hasan at the Constitutional Convention, okay?
Up next, we're going to break down the beef between two very high-profile political commentators and influencers, MAGA star and YouTuber Matt Walsh of The Daily Wire and Mehdi Hasan, formerly an MSNBC anchor, now the co-founder or founder and editor-in-chief of Zeteo News. It should be said, I come into this as not a fan of either of these individuals, to be honest with you. I've now reviewed their whole beef, and we're going to go over a portion of it, but they're arguing with each other. I disagree with both of them on lots of stuff. I consider both of their political commentary to be noxious or trollish in different ways at times, in ways I really don't like. But in this particular feud, I do come out more on one side than the other. And that is because Matt Walsh has gone on a broadside against Mehdi Hasan, arguing that he is not an American, despite being literally an American, a U.S. citizen. He was not born in America. He was born in Britain in the United Kingdom, and then he became a U.S. citizen. But according to Matt, he is not a real American, and we're going to get into Matt's reasons why and why I don't really agree with them. Let's take a look at this first clip from Matt's long monologue against Mehdi, which I listened to the whole thing, but I just have a couple clips I want to show you and explain why I cannot and do not co-sign them.
So let's take, for example, Mehdi Hasan, the former MSNBC host. Now, Hasan doesn't have an actual audience. His show is typically pulling in fewer than 40,000 viewers in the key demographic, which is much than I would get if I let the inanimate fish in the background host the show.
So I'll pause here and just say that I think this is a dumb way to open up your argument against Mehdi Hasan. He doesn't have a real audience. Sure, his ratings on MSNBC were not great, but I think that's more of a network thing. Like, their ratings just in general are not great. And then since founding Zeteo and branching into YouTube and podcasting, Mehdi pulls in pretty decent numbers, actually. I would say they're actually quite comparable to Matt Walsh's numbers in terms of YouTube and Twitter and other stuff. But more importantly, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I have more followers than you, or my videos get more views than you. Doesn't make you right at all. It doesn't like make your points more or less true. It's just kind of a lame thing that influencers do. And I think it's not very impressive, especially considering Matt's following is not organic. The Daily Wire invested millions of dollars into paid promotion to build his platform, whereas others have not had that. So I would personally not cast aspersions about other people's views. And again, it just doesn't matter. Like, get to your point. And his point is actually, not great either. Let's listen.
I think that if you can play church bells, you can pray the call to prayer. We are as American as anyone else, and don't take any BS from it.
You're as American as anyone else? Really, Mehdi? Really, Mr. Hasan, you're as American as anyone? You're a Muslim who was born in the UK, came to this country less than 10 years ago in your mid-30s to work for Al Jazeera. Okay, is there anyone who seriously thinks that Mehdi Hasan is American at all, much less as American as anyone else? There was not anybody with the last name Hasan at the Constitutional Convention, okay? There were no Hasans dying on the battlefield in the Revolutionary War. Not a single one. There were only the kinds of people that Hasan despises, even as he tries to co-opt the country that they created.
So there's a lot to unpack in this part of Matt's rant, but I have to be honest, this comes off as pretty ignorant, pretty discriminatory to me. First, there's the conversation that this originated in part from about whether Muslim calls to prayer can be aired publicly in the same way in Muslim majority parts of the U.S., where in the same way church bells can be rung. And he took a very short clip of Mehdi there, but when I was preparing for this segment and I watched both of their full videos about this, Mehdi's position is that you can have neutral local sound ordinances, and that as long as they comply with rules and regulations about public sound that apply to all religions equally, within the scope of that, Muslims should be able to air their call to prayer. I would agree with that. And I say that as somebody who is obviously, in terms of hardline Islam, not a fan, although I leave nuance for a wide array of beliefs and practices and individuals in any faith. But yes, of course, America is a country with religious freedom. And while I agree with like Matt's point about 5 a.m. calls to prayer not being publicly blasted loudly, of course, but that's not because it's a call to prayer for the Muslim faith, it's because it's 5 a.m. So I would say you would have neutral local regulations and ordinances, and within that, yes, absolutely, Muslim calls to prayer should be treated the same as church bells ringing, because we live in an America that actually quite key to our founding was the idea of religious freedom. And people like Matt will be the first to wrap themselves in that idea when it comes to Christians, which I often agree with and defend. But then suddenly when it comes to Muslim people, they are just full of disdain for that. And yes, Muslims are just as American if they are Americans. The definition of an American is a citizen of the United States of America. So when he says, for example, like, does anyone really believe that Mehdi Hasan is an American? I do, because he literally is. Like, you don't get to choose your own reality. Civics is not a choose your own adventure game. Mehdi Hasan is an American citizen, whether Matt Walsh likes it or not. And simply saying, well, his names sound foreign. Mehdi Hasan. Were there any Hassans at the Constitutional Convention? No. There also weren't any Jews involved in the Constitutional Convention. There was no one with the name Shapiro who signed the original Declaration of Independence. That doesn't make Ben Shapiro not an American. Doesn't mean that Jews aren't every bit as American as anyone else. It's very, very bizarre. And yes, bigoted and discriminatory to go on your little tirade like this and just use his foreign-sounding name as an argument he's not really an American. If that's not just like racist, I really don't know what is. You can disagree, and I do, with tons of things that Mehdi Hasan says. You can tell him he's a terrible person, he's a piece of crap because of X, Y, and Z. But it's not because his name is Hasan. It's not because there was nobody that looked like him there when the Constitution was signed. That is un-American, and that is ignorant and discriminatory. And you don't get credit. You don't get a cookie that, oh, my people were here hundreds of years ago. You didn't do shit, Matt. You did nothing. You don't deserve any special benefits or favors or credit because your ancestors were here longer. The same way, you don't deserve blame for what your ancestors did. And Matt would be the first to say that when the topic of reparations for slavery comes up, for example. And I would totally agree. White people today should not be punished for the sins of their ancestors because they are not their ancestors. But in the same way, you can't be like, well, my people were here then, and that means that I'm more of an American than you. No, either you're an individual or you're some amorphous collectivist blob that's, passed through my blood, my birthright as an American, as if that wasn't a part of the whole reason of America actually existing, was we don't want hereditary rule. We don't want hereditary entitlement or endowment by birth of who you descend from to determine your status in society is actually like extremely un-American idea and part of what we rebelled against. But go off, I guess. And it's just interesting because Matt seems to want to have it one way but not the other. I get to take credit for my ancestors, and the fact that I'm descended from these people means I'm special and more American than other Americans whose ancestors weren't here hundreds of years ago or whatever. But also, I don't take any responsibility or blame for all the bad things those people did. That's not me. I'm my own person. Which is it? You have to decide if your goal is to be remotely consistent at all. But then again, we're talking about Matt Walsh, so that's just not really relevant, I guess. Let's watch the rest of Matt's monologue here, the portion that I clipped.
In fact, what if I went to Hasan's actual home country, India, and ran for office, lost, and then said, great job, brown people. Tell you brown people really screwed up again.
So he's referencing here a tweet that Mehdi Hasan sent out saying, great job, white people, because Trump won. And like, I think white men and white women, he was sharing a poll that like said they've majority voted for Trump. That's the kind of thing where absolutely, I hate that style of politics and commentary. And I think you could totally criticize Mehdi Hasan for that. But Matt had to make it racist. Let's wind this back real quick. I want you to catch something.
In fact, what if I went to Hassan's actual home country, India, and ran for office, lost, and then said, great job?
What if I went to Hassan's actual home country, India? Mehdi Hasan is not an Indian citizen. He's of Indian heritage, partially. He was born in the United Kingdom. He is a British American, a British citizen and an American citizen. He's not a citizen of India. Wasn't born in India, but you're saying because that's his heritage, he's really a member of that country, as if what really matters is your race, not your nationality, not your citizenship, not your loyalty. That is un-American. That suggests that if you are an Asian American who was born in America, well, you're really Chinese. You should really go back to China if you say things that Matt Walsh doesn't like because he's a real American because of what his ancestors did. And now, you know, he podcasts for a living, but people who look like him built this country. It's just that, I mean, if that doesn't make it clear that this is a discriminatory thing, where you're labeling somebody, you're saying somebody's real country is where their ancestors are from. Like you're not just an American. You're not even a British person because you're brown. Go back to India. Like, and then his whole silly analogy he's making here where he's like, oh, well, what if I went to a different country? What if he talks about Uganda? He talks in his full monologue. He talks about India. Well, if you went there and became a citizen through the legal process, as Mehdi Hasan has done, then yes, you would be entitled to a say about how their society is run. And if they didn't grant you that, or he said like they'll stone you, that would be because they are repressive and bad. And you should not want America to be like that. What part of this isn't clocking to you, Matt?
I said, great job, brown people. Tell you brown people really screwed up again. You know, I'm just as Indian as any of you are. Yeah, I just got off the plane last Tuesday. I'm just as Indian as any of you. This is our country. It is not yours, Mr. Hasan. Any actual American would understand that concept very well.
Well, I am an actual American. By any definition, Matt Walsh wants to hallucinate. That is not fact, because the actual definition of an American is a U.S. citizen. And I don't acknowledge that fact. I don't acknowledge any of this. I think there's a wide array of legitimate, substantive, and even personal criticisms and attacks to make of Mehdi Hasan, but he is not less of an American because his name sounds foreign to you. He's not really Indian, despite not being born in India or being a citizen of India, just because he is of Indian descent, any more than Matt is really Irish. The whole thing is a sad and ignorant display that would have, a few years ago, been confined to the fringes of MAGA commentary. Even Matt Walsh, a few years ago, wouldn't have gone this far, have become this openly racist and discriminatory in his criticism of a minority journalist on the other side, because 5 years ago, he would have been roundly condemned, I think, within the conservative movement. But partially as a response to the hypercensoriousness, to the cancel culture, maybe, I don't know, the standards for decency and civility and integrity on the American right, particularly in new media and media, are lower than I have seen them in my decade doing this. And I think it's both a moral and a political catastrophe that this is where we're at. But that's my take. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed, like, yada, yada, yada. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to rate and review if you're listening on audio podcasts, whatever platform you listen on. And even if you're just watching us on YouTube, go spam those Apple Podcast reviews anyway, and then meet us back here, because we'll talk again real soon.